Coming up next on The Health Hustle.
If you get in jiu-jitsu and you're 220 pounds and super strong, like, yeah, you can still develop skills, but the smaller dudes have to develop skills and have to have good technique. And for me, I got my ass kicked like 3 times in high school, and then eventually it was like, dude, I got to figure this out. Like, I can't lift enough weights to fight all these guys. And and yeah, once I learned jiu-jitsu, it's weird. Like, I kind of stopped getting in fights. I ended up having a few more after that, but the frequency of street fights went down. Which I was like, hey, this is good. This is nice, because like some shit would pop off, and you would just be like, look, man, like, this is not good. Like, how much is your deductible? Like, it's just not going to be a great situation. And when like a moment gets to a boiling point where it seems like violence is going to occur between 2 males, if one of the guys is extremely calm, that's the dude who knows what's up. And people aren't used to that. And when they encounter somebody who, like, they're yelling and taking their shirt off and like beating their chest, and another guy's just over there and his resting heart rate is like 48 and hadn't changed, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do what we're about to do, because he seems too calm for this situation.
What up, y'all? Corey here. On today's episode, I got a chance to sit down with Kevin Young. Kevin is the founder of Fasted Athlete. It is a supplement company that is making waves in the fitness world. But before he was helping people optimize their performance, he was in the thick of some of the most intense disaster zones you can imagine. For 13 years, Kevin worked as a catastrophe adjuster. I know, I had no idea what that was until I talked to him. Basically witnessing firsthand the devastation caused by hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters. He spent weeks on end working tirelessly in these challenging environments, and it was during this time that he saw a need for a better way to sustain his energy and focus throughout the long, demanding days. This led him to creating the first creatine-based nootropic, Lift, and ultimately founded Fasted Athlete in 2022. His company is dedicated to helping individuals build strength not just for themselves, but so they can better show up for their teams and their communities. Now Fasted Athlete has Lift and also colostrum, which he was kind enough to give me, and it's honestly really great. When he's not busy building his company, Kevin enjoys an active lifestyle in Austin, Texas with his wife and co-founder, Heather. You'll also find him on the water wing foiling, on a pickleball court, or hitting the slopes for snowboarding and surfing. I can't wait to dive in this episode with Kevin. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, one of the most common reasons that I see this is not having a well-defined niche. If you go to the link in the description, I have a free 3-step process that walks you through exactly how to get clarity on which niche is best suited for you and your business. Without further ado, let's go. Kevin Young, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. I think where I want to start is that people from the outside looking in would look at you and be like, dude's got it all. He's got the wife, he's got the business, he's had a successful career, he's got the body, you're a very fit guy. But I'd be willing to bet that's not where you started. And so
it definitely was not.
So where I want to start, if I did my research correctly, you grew up in what sounded like a tough environment.
Very tough. And I just want to say thanks for having me on. And I appreciate the compliment. I received that. But at the same time, like, dude, I'm a work in progress. Like, I'm by no means a perfect person. I'm a flawed individual. And I think a lot of my growth that I've experienced recently has been because I've accepted some of my imperfections and accepted people around me and their imperfections. And to get back to your question, yeah, I grew up in a rough spot. I mean, my mom was a Colombian immigrant. My dad was a surfer who, you know, I love him to death, but he wasn't financially successful. And so we had plenty of Christmases where we didn't get gifts, or we were on welfare. You know, CPS shows up at the door, domestic violence, alcoholism, drug abuse, all kinds of crazy shit. Luckily, I had a brother and a sister who went through a lot of those experiences with me. So we kind of had our little powwow as we were going through all this chaos. And what I found is me at 37 years old, now I reflect back on a lot of those difficult experiences I had growing up. And I feel like instead of looking at them like, oh, that was traumatic whenever we walked in on my friend's mom and she was doing heroin, or this guy got locked up for this and this and this, and we didn't see him for 10 years. Or that one time the cops came to my door and they were looking for a friend of mine who was about to go to jail. Like, I look back at those situations, and instead of holding that trauma as like a weight and thinking like, oh man, like, oh, woe is me, shit was so hard. Instead, it's like, it's not like an anchor to me anymore. Instead, it's more like weights on the bar. If I'm walking up to a squat rack and I'm like, dude, I'm thinking about stuff now. Like, as I'm going through my businesses and I'm dealing with different challenges, I'm like, this is hard, but I've been training for this my whole life. And these traumatic moments and these difficult things and the environmental pressure that I felt early on in my life was just weights on the squat rack that was just making me stronger. And I really believe that there are two different ways you can look at early life traumatic moments. It can either be an anchor, or it can be placed on your squat rack, making you stronger.
Totally agree, man. Have you read David Goggins' book?
The first one?
Yeah.
I have read that one. Yeah.
I sadly am just going through it right now. And a lot of what you're describing me is giving me that same perspective as well. I didn't always look at it like the way you just explained until I started reading some of his work. And I think you're right, man, is that like when you look at what he's been able to do, it's because he did go through the things that made him stronger. They could have equally destroyed him. And I think for a lot of people it does. I think for a lot of people, the weight of the bar crushes them. But if you are strong enough to push back through that, it definitely strengthens you for everything you face future in life, everything you overcome and accomplish. So
yeah, I agree 100%. And my wife went through a similar like rough childhood. In fact, probably rougher than mine. Her dad was in prison most of her life. Her mom has mental illness. They were on welfare. So she's got a single family where the mom is she's a great person, but mentally she's unstable. And they had the same problems. They had prison, drugs, welfare, all kinds of difficult things, more difficult than mine. And it's almost like that environment was just compressing her. And there was a moment where, either A, she can completely collapse and crush and just be pulverized in dust, or you create a fucking diamond. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the cool thing about stories like this, where people had challenges growing up and they got through them, not perfectly. We still made mistakes along the way. And during the time that was difficult, it's not like we were sitting there like some kind of Buddha monk going, this will serve me in the future. Like, no, we were probably frustrated and like wondering why our life sucked, but we got through it. And the number of kids and young people out there, and I can just say for the United States, there's probably more of those kids going through difficult moments that have challenging environments that, if done correctly, they can alchemize that and turn it into something powerful.
I think the interesting thing that a lot of people are dealing with now, which seems like more so than ever, is just the whole comfort crisis deal, which has been leading to depression and anxiety, which I'm going to be curious. I'm curious as to see how that's going to turn into, like, what kind of humans that's going to create, right?
Yeah.
Because like when you look at our parents' generation, I've been reading a lot of biographies lately, like Terry Crews and Will Smith and what was the other one I just read? Tim Kennedy.
Yep.
And like you look at a lot of these guys, and what created them was more often than not is like they kind of had abusive childhoods, like very physically abusive, very aggressive parents. And it was kind of just like the thing in that generation for a lot of people is dealing with domestic abuse in a lot of cases. And it created some pretty amazing people, one could say, from a success standpoint. But also, too, it's like now we have this new generation of people going through what you'd call more mental challenges of like the anxiety, depression and stuff. And so I'm curious as to see like, what is that? What kind of human is that going to create? Like the ones that rise out and become diamonds in the rough, one could say, you know?
Man, I don't know. Because I kind of put myself more in that old school sort of development, like the Tim Kennedys of the world, which I love his book. The way we grew up, I had an older brother, and I mean, he just kicked the shit out of me all the time. And we had a lot of imperfect people around us. And that did form this sort of tough, callous person. And I don't know really how you connect with, say, somebody who's addicted to TikTok and video games, and their anxiety is related to them not moving. Because me as like an old school dude, I would just be like, yo,
Go
get
to work
outside.
out.
Go work out, go run around, play football, whatever, get in jiu-jitsu, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more important than ever. And I can speak to the guy audience. I don't have any kids of my own. And when I'm reflecting on things that I feel like I know, I usually can talk to guys about it. I don't know what the girl's experience is, but I think it's going to be more important than ever going forward for young males to have like good, strong, older male role models to kind of help address this problem. And those young guys, they may not have like one dude in their life that's like their mentor. I think more likely it's going to be sort of like a gumbo mix of micro mentors where you get to spend like 10 minutes with your friend's dad who's successful in business, and he can kind of drop some hints here, and here. And then your other friend's dad, he's like an athlete and he'll talk to you about sports. You get a little bit over here. And then you have reverse role models around you that are fucking up. And you're like, well, Frank lives in a van. I'm not going to do what Frank does. And so I think these young guys are going to have to sort of build a gumbo of micro mentors and take the lessons from the reverse role models around them.
If I do parenting correctly, I'll hopefully just have my kids on my farm and we'll just do the hobby farm life and I won't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah.
And bring them up exactly how I want to, I guess you could say. But
yeah, what were you thinking about putting the farm?
Somewhere outside of Austin.
Yeah.
Last summer I spent a month out there and it changed me fundamentally as a human. It just made me recognize just how fulfilling it is to just be out on your own and with the farm animals and like taking care of things that you're responsible for that'll literally die if you don't. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time where I was like, okay, this parenting thing, I get it now, is like there's so much fulfillment that comes from taking care of something. And so I'll be out there again this next month for an entire month again. There's goats, chickens, ducks, longhorn, bunch of exotic animals. But yeah, I'll be out there for a month and I definitely see it in my future for sure.
I love it. Plus you get this sort of like sense of freedom and self-sufficiency. And I believe that's something that's hardwired into us. And we don't even have to seek it out. I feel like it's already kind of built in.
Totally.
And so when you're fulfilling that, which is very hard to do if you live like downtown Austin, you're not really, you're just, I mean, I guess you're kind of surviving, but you're not surviving in the same way that you're talking about where you're like growing food and raising things. I mean, I think a lot of our low level anxiety and our needs and grasping for things, a lot of them are just us trying to fill voids that are created by this sort of urban lifestyle, which I don't think is terrible necessarily. There's a lot of benefits to it. I think a lot of innovation comes from getting large groups of people together and thinking together. But at the same time, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I'm thinking about as I get older and me and my wife, as we have kids, we want to get out somewhere closer to nature with a little bit more land, get a little bit more self-sufficient.
Yeah, there's on an earlier episode that I did with Ravi, shout out to him, go check it out. He's a doctor, very smart guy, and he recommended a book to me. It's called Tribe, if I remember correctly, and I read it not that long ago. And the short of the story is that, so back when Americans, one could say, came over to here to the United States and started like taking out all the Indians, is what they found was that there was many cases where people who were living in like the industrial cities would leave the industrial cities and go live with Indian tribes seeking fulfillment and seeking a better way of life. There were 0 cases of an Indian ever going from a tribe to an industrial culture, basically showing like people find a lot more joy and fulfillment in being in part of a small group in a tribe with purpose and meaning than there is in these giant industrial cities. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
That says a lot about just human nature in general.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of, that lifestyle sort of, I don't want to say it goes against this idea of like capitalism, but it's sort of, you change your metric on what you consider success.
Totally.
Like for us, we're like building fences and like establishing private property rights. And you're describing like a situation where people are just excited to have community and resources and tell stories and have connection, which I think is what a lot of people are looking for.
Totally. Yeah. The membership community aspect and niche communities that are popping up right now is insane, dude. Like the amount of people, newsletters used to be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people still do them, and I think there's still a lot of value, and you can definitely still create a really powerful newsletter now. But in my opinion, like the new like newsletter or the new like social media platform, in my opinion, is communities. Like you're seeing so many of them now, and so many people gravitate towards them. Is like there's a craving for genuine connection, and not like big 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 communities. I'm talking like at most 200 people, 150 maybe tops is
monkey circle.
100%.
Yeah.
Anything more than that, like the human mind just can't handle it. It's just too much.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I look at my friends group, and we are lucky to live in a town like Austin where there's so many cool, smart people that are doing exciting things and a lot of interesting guys and gals. And it's like, I feel like almost every week or every 2 weeks, I run into somebody new that I've never met before, and they fucking blow me away. I'm like, wait, what do you do? They're like, well, yeah, we're curing cancer, but whatever. Blah, blah. They're not even talking about. I'm like, wait, what? And so the number of really cool, smart, good people around us, there's so many, but at the same time, like I almost have to self-trim my circle. That way I can really show up for the people around me, because other than that, like, I'll have like 40 text messages on my phone, and I just can't show up for that many people.
Totally agree. I had to learn the same lesson after a couple of years of living here, is that you definitely get shiny-eyed with how many cool people you can connect with and how many coffee meetings you could honestly have in a single week. Yeah. But eventually you're like, no, I cannot join you for this coffee meeting. Not because they're not a good person or you don't want to help them, but you're right. You reach a point where it's not even helpful to anybody anymore, them or you, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And for me, that sort of tunnel vision has gotten even more focused since I got married, which I got married in November to my wife, Heather. She's amazing. And it's like me and her are now building out our company, Fast Athlete, together as co-founders. And I tell her every day when we sit down and have our cup of coffee in the morning, I'm like, babe, it's me and you. Like, we're doing this, and we love the people around us, and we're going to do our best to show up for those folks, but like, you're my most important person, and like I got to make sure I can show up 100% for you, because like me and you and what we're doing together is like, it's top priority. And then we have like friends and family around us we want to help out too, but I only got so much time and so much attention.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good priorities.
Yeah.
I want to pull back on you a little bit here. So definitely difficult circumstances growing up, challenging childhood. Did you have any sort of entrepreneurship in your family? And second part of that question, did your siblings rise out as successful as you did?
So the first part of the question, yeah, my dad was like a kind of cool, crazy inventor his whole life. He created sort of like a pinball machine type game at one point or another. He got a patent on it. He always was swinging on ideas, and he was a very creative person. But he had a problem of A, not a lot of capital. B, he wasn't great at marketing. And C, execution on these ideas sometimes didn't come through. So like, as much as he tried, and I think he's like one of the smartest, more creative people I know, it never worked out. We just kept swinging on things. And part of the reason why the relationship between my dad and my mom didn't work out is because he always told her that we were going to be like millionaires. Like that was back in the day where it was like $1 million was a lot of money. They'd be like, yeah, we're going to be millionaires with this next invention. And eventually my mom was like, fuck this shit. Dude, it's not happening. We're still on welfare. You quit your job. Like, we need to actually make money to feed these kids. And so my dad was somebody who tried his best to become a successful entrepreneur and wasn't. Successful in the sense of if you're measuring it in money.
Yeah, for sure.
But the lessons that I got to take off of that, watching these experiences and seeing my dad swing on ideas and have no fear and go towards this, and didn't work out. That's okay. Optimistic. We're going to go get the next one. Go for the next one. Although he didn't have financial wealth, man, the lessons I got from that were like so valuable. And I tell him too, I just saw him last week. I went to Puerto Rico where he lives, and I tell him as much as I can that like, I'm so grateful for the way we grew up, and I wouldn't want to grow up any other way. Because I feel like everything we had, we earned, and we managed to have a really good time. Not all the time, but we managed to have some really good times with less resources. And, you know, I have a certain level of like grit inside of me and lack of fear, maybe too much lack of fear sometimes, that I believe came from my environment, and a lot of it from watching my dad and my older brother. That it's like, you can't go to college and get these character traits, you know what I mean? It only can come from your environment. So I think this is something that a lot of like really wealthy guys, like you'll hear Rogan talk about it, like how do you raise kids? Like, let's say your parents weren't successful in the environment, and through their success and failures, you learned a lot, and now you became successful, and now you have kids, and you want them to kind of like get the same lessons as you, but you don't want to deprive them and put them in very difficult situations and not pick them up when they fall down. It's like, I haven't encountered that yet, but I have a feeling before we have kids, we're going to be at a certain level of security and freedom where hopefully they don't have to worry about the same things that I had to worry about. But then I'm like, how are they going to learn the same lessons that I learned? Maybe that's not even relevant. I don't know.
I think it is. It's something I've pondered as well. Honestly,
Yeah.
ever since meeting my girlfriend, I've been with my girlfriend now for a little over a year, and we've gotten very serious very quick. And that is a topic that I have thought more now than ever before, is that assuming that we reach the financial goals that we hope to reach, and we're in a position where like kids are a very easy decision for us, is, yeah, how do you tell a kid that's like, let's say you're financially well off and they're like, hey, I want to, whatever, name your fancy car, Maserati. And you can't necessarily say like, well, we can't afford it, because you could.
Yeah.
Right. So then how do you approach that conversation? Right. It's like, you just say you're just not going to. And then the question is, well, then why? Right. It's like, so all of a sudden it's got me thinking of, well, because I want to teach you how to deal with difficult times. I don't know. Like, how do you have that conversation to a child that maybe hasn't developed enough to understand the benefit in working for something or dealing with hard times or challenge? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I do think about it. I do think it's relevant, but I don't have a good answer to that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, just off the top of my head, this is like the no-brainer thing, is just give them chores. You know, they're going to have to be mowing the yard and doing the dishes and doing things around the house. And if you guys got a farm, like, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of shit for them to do. Like, you're going to be like, hey, you're going to have to go like mow that field over there, or like milk the cow, whatever it is.
And that's what my friend Sarah Files did. She was at the dinner that I hosted last night, and she's very successful. She's doing fine. And I've talked to her about this, about her kids. And I was like, how do you deal with that? Right. Because like, you could afford anything they've ever wanted. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what she does. She's like, they have to work for everything they want. Like, if they wanted whatever it is, name your thing, they have to do some sort of chore, whether it's like mowing the lawn or milking the cow or whatever the hell it is. That is how she deals with it. But
yeah, I think the other thing that's going to be key is, you know, say you have a boy. We're hoping we have a couple of boys. I think once they start to get in that rebellious stage of like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, where they just don't want to do whatever it is that their parents say. And I'm saying this based on my own feelings that I felt when I was a kid. I'm hoping there's going to be a group of a couple, 2, 3, 4 older, cool males around, the uncles, the whatever, because they seem to tap in to the kids. Because I know when I had like some cool uncles around me, they'd tell me something, I actually listened to them, because I didn't have all this baggage of like, that's my dad, he's trying to control me, fuck that guy. Instead, like when these other guys would hit me up and tell me these things, I'd be like, okay, I actually receive it. And maybe the lessons that like our parents gave us, maybe for me, it sunk in at a later date. It was subconsciously floating around back there. I didn't absorb it right away, but for sure, older males around me that weren't trying to control me when they were dropping lessons or wisdom on me or asking me to do one thing, I was receiving it better.
that's a really good point. I didn't think about it like that, but you're right. I can reflect back on a number of times when I was around that age too, is like, whether it was my dad's business partner or one of my dad's buddies, where they would say something and it would click for me, and I would hold on to that a lot stronger than I probably would from my own parents. Yeah. In the exact same way that like now with my parents, I'm their kid, so they don't listen to anything I have to say, even though I have some decent advice for certain things in their life, but they don't listen because I'm their kid, right? Like, why would they listen to me? I'm just their son.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get that.
Wow. My relationship with my parents is a little bit different. I mean, I've done psychedelics with my dad. Like, we've totally blown down a whole bunch of barriers together. Smoked weed with my dad. I've done a bunch of shit with my dad. And he actually does listen to me, which is really cool. He's struggling with a couple of health things, and I'll be like, hey, try to implement this, or maybe cut back on this and add this in there. And it's nice that it's actually well received. And granted, he doesn't do everything that I ask or advise him to do, but he does take into consideration the things that we talk about.
When did that start, and why?
That started for us when I was about 12 years old.
Whoa.
My mom and dad split, and I have an older brother. He went off on his own. He moved out of the house. My sister went with my mom, and I went with my dad. And so at that point, like, my dad was so like independent and free thinking that he kind of started to speak to me as, I don't want to say equal, but he gave me a lot of respect and allowed me to help him make decisions. So we're kind of like, he was my dad, but we're also kind of brothers. It was very strange. And he was very open about things. You know, he talked to me about, you know, drugs and alcohol when I was very young. And he's like, hey, if you're ever going to partake, talk to me first. And, you know, if you're ever going to smoke weed, let me know first. And he was smoking a lot of weed. And I was like, all right, well, I smoked weed by myself first. And then eventually was like, hey, Dad, you know, I know what you're doing. You know what I'm doing. Like, we're going to have to do this together.
Where did you all live when your family got fractured like that?
We were in Lubbock, Texas.
You and your dad?
Yeah.
Where was your mom and then your other brother?
She was also in Lubbock, Texas, and my brother moved to Cleveland. So my dad and I were living together, and my mom and sister were living together. And when I was 15, we were losing our house. We were getting foreclosed on. And like a last minute Hail Mary, my dad just took he sold cars, and he took like this little red for sale sign you normally see on like a car window, that for sale, and you could write the price. And he taped it to a piece of plywood and stuck it in our front yard. And somebody happened to drive by within a week and see this little shitty for sale sign and was like, I'll buy that weird house over there. And so these people came in and bought our house, and we didn't lose it to the bank. And it was like a last minute, like we were about to get kicked out of our house. And we sold the house, and then we sold all the furniture in it for $500. My dad asked me, he goes, where do you want to live? And I was like, shit, Florida sounds cool. And he was like, okay, yeah, I like Florida. He surfed his whole life, so he was down with getting close to the beach. He was like, where do you think you want to go to in Florida? And I was like, well, at that time I was riding BMX and skateboarding and stuff. I was like, well, Clearwater, Florida's got the best skate park around. We could go there. And he was like, done.
What?
And so we moved to Clearwater, Florida, in like a piece of shit, like 1972 Mercedes-Benz diesel with no air conditioning in August, with this like oscillating fucking fan on the dashboard, dude. So you're just like driving down the highway like for fucking 16, 18 hours down I-10 with just an oscillating fan going between like hot and blowy was the two settings that we had. And yeah, so we moved together, me and my dad, to Clearwater, Florida, and we had $500, and it was rough. Like we lived in, you wouldn't really call them the projects, but they're project adjacent kind of shitty housing with no furniture for like 9 months. We were just sleeping on the ground. Like,
do you have a sleeping bag or anything?
We had a sleeping bag and a pillow, but no mattresses, nothing, just sleeping on the fucking ground. But I was stoked because like I got to go to the beach. I got to ride my bike. He was always optimistic, and I was like, all right, well, I guess this ain't that bad. It was like peanut butter, jellies, and no furniture.
You must not have known anybody here, correct?
No.
In Clearwater?
No.
How did he end up making ends meet? Or how, did he just like find a local job or what?
Yeah, he ended up getting a job. He had sold cars, so he got a job selling cars.
Interesting.
And yeah, so we moved there with no money and chose the location based on where I wanted to go because I wanted to go ride my bike.
Luckily, you were young enough to like kind of think it was cool that you get to go live in this new city and do this sleeping bag thing. Was there ever a point where that flipped though, where you're like, this is stupid? Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, this was the first time that I realized that human connection is very important for me. And as much as I wanted to get out of Lubbock, Texas, because it's Lubbock, Texas. I don't think I have to explain it. It's not great. It's flat and dusty and dirty. I did have some great friends there. And when I went to Clearwater, I had a lot of friends, and I don't know if you'd call me popular, but I had a lot of good friends. But I didn't feel a connection to them. And about a year and a half in, it just became very apparent that I needed to move back. And so I told my dad, I said, hey man, like, I don't know why, I just feel kind of lonely here. And I feel like I need to go back home and finish high school in Lubbock. And
were you going to school in Clearwater? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the time he was, I don't want to say he was devastated, but he was real sad because we were like,
for sure,
we were super tight buddies. And, yeah, so I moved back to Lubbock, finished high school there. But that was the first time that I realized like how important it is to have people that you connect with.
Totally.
And I don't know exactly how to like find the one metric that makes connection. Cause I can hang out with some people and have jokes and have a good time, but I don't necessarily feel connected. So I don't know how to describe what it is, but I think when you know.
For sure.
And I had that same feeling like 10 years later. I went to University of Texas, and my fall semester of senior year, I studied abroad in Australia. I was there for like 8 months. I went super early, like 3 months early. Didn't really go to school, but kind of went to school. And then stayed 3 months late. And at that time in Australia, I lived on the beach, like not like 2 blocks from the beach. I lived like on the beach that I wanted to live. I got to surf every day. I worked at a bar like 30 or 40 hours a week, making $25 an hour plus tips. So that was like better than the average starting salary coming out of Macomb's business school. I was doing better than that. I was living on the beach. I had a lot of friends, a lot of girlfriends. But about 7 months in, I felt this same feeling that I had felt before, that I wasn't connected to the people around me, even though I had a lot of friends and homies. And so I almost was going to live there permanently. And then that feeling came up, and I was like, yeah, I got to go back to Austin. So
interesting. Yeah, I'd be curious as to what you think that is. I have a few thoughts around it, but I learned that lesson as well when I was living in Iowa. I went to Iowa. I don't recommend it to anybody for graduate school. And yeah, it was probably like my second year in graduate school in Iowa. And I reached that same tipping point where I remember very distinctly, I was in my apartment, and my apartment all of a sudden felt like a prison. It felt like a cage.
Wow.
And I remember just like this like wave of depression swept over me, and I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I so sad all of a sudden? And what I realized leading up into that point, I was so focused on my grades and my academics and working out and just like the grind of what it took to get through a grad program and still be healthy and fit, that I wasn't really tapping into my people. And ultimately that led me to a pretty dark place. And that was the big aha moment for me. I was like, oh, okay, like there's more to this health and wellness and happiness thing than just like exercise and eating healthy and working hard, right? There's a degree of like people matter a lot.
Big time.
And, but like for me, something that I've noticed, you brought up Austin. Austin is the first place I've ever lived that feels like a real sense of community. And the thing that I have found, and again, this is just me speculating as to why it feels that way, is that it's rare for me to go downtown and not run into somebody I know. Like chance encounters, I feel like is like one of the key things, and you can't fabricate it. Like it just happens, right? Like you go for a walk around Lady Bird, or you go to the Whole Foods, or you go to whatever your favorite restaurant, and you're like, oh, hey, like you run into somebody you know. To me, that is like a huge predictor of like that community, that connection, that feeling of belonging more than anything. But
yeah, and it's like the right amount, right? It's not too much.
Totally.
Where if you live in a small town, you see the same people every day. You're like, damn,
yeah. Yeah.
Eddie, you see Eddie, you're like, damn, I hope he doesn't see me. But
it's usually Brian.
Yeah.
Fucking Brian.
But here I think it's the perfect balance of like running into somebody every now and then and getting that kind of familiar feeling. And then within that larger group of people, you have, 5 or 6, 7 people that you're really tight with. And for me, what I'm finding is I'm really leaning into relationships around me of guys and girls that want me to win and I want them to win, and we're propelling each other. And that's kind of the bar. And going along with that, like, in order for somebody, and they don't even have to say it, like, there's like an energy that they put out where you can tell, like, oh, this guy's got my back. Like, he wants me to do well. Even if we're in like the same industry, it's like, this dude's pumping me up. Like, I'm his hype guy. What goes along with that is, like, usually the people that want you to win and are propelling you and have good energy, like, they are high performers who might be somewhat competitive at certain things in their life, but they're not overall like life competing with you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you can kind of feel it when you step in the room with them, and they're very calm and confident. And like I said, they want you to win. They want the people around you to win. And when I find people like that, I'm like, these are my guys. These are my people. Like, I'll just text them. I'll be like, dude, come over to my house. I'm doing prime rib tonight. Like, I'll cook for everybody. I'm so stoked about that. And yeah, I've been leaning more into those kind of relationships and sort of spacing myself away from some others that were just more on the taking side of things. And part of the reason is because I'm married now. I told you I'm really committed with my wife in that relationship, and I'm in the middle of growing this business. And it's like, any of the entrepreneurs out there who know, if you're an early stage startup, especially if you're self-funded like we are, you're like fucking tunnel vision. And you have to have only people around you who want you to win and who aren't competing and trying to pull you down or take. And I thrive on that energy. And if I feel something from somebody else where it's like extracting or not honest or competitive, I just can't have it right now.
Totally, man. Yeah, all ships rise together. I do a quarterly deal. I do reviews regularly, weekly, quarterly, and yearly. And every quarter, I do exactly what you're talking about. Is I take inventory on the people I'm spending time with and the people I'm not spending time with. And it probably sounds judgmental, but like, yeah, I'm pretty particular about who those people are or who those people aren't, for that matter.
Yeah.
I don't always get it right. Don't get me wrong. There's like moments throughout the weeks or months or years where I was like spending far too much time with people I probably shouldn't be. And again, no judgment upon them, but like,
of course,
if you want to go where you want to go, like, you have to be intentional about that for sure. So
yeah, and it's not coming from, and I think we see it the same way. It's not coming from a place where like we feel better than somebody else, or like, you know, we're not like spiritually elevated or something. Like, no. We're not above anybody. We're just like, I'm going to choose not to spend my time with this person, and maybe they'll spend their time with somebody who they propel themselves better than me and them propel themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you want to be around people that are going the same direction as you.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, like,
yeah.
My favorite analogy of this, I learned it from Tom Bilyeu, and he was talking about, he's like, listen, if you have somebody that's just like a total schmuck, super lazy, doesn't do anything, bottom of the barrel, and then you put them on an island with like 5 or 6 other high achieving Navy SEALs, what's more likely to happen? Is that person going to rise up to the Navy SEALs, or the Navy SEALs going to sink down to them? They're going to rise the fuck up to the Navy SEALs, right? Because you're around all these other people that are just very high achieving.
Yeah.
But that's true of everyday life. Like, the people you spend your time with, you're either going to rise up or fall to the people you spend your time with. And you got to be conscious with that. So.
Yeah. And it's crazy. And I'm sure you've noticed the same pattern that, like, let's say you meet somebody through a friend, and it's a guy, and he's really cool, and you feel this dope energy. You don't even have to like ask him what he does. You just know, like, this dude is high level. I don't know what he does, but he is really cool and calm and confident, and he pumps people up, and he's not fake, and he's authentic. And I can tell he knows that it's like that saying, like, know thyself. Like, this dude knows himself. And then eventually you hang out with him 3 or 4 times, and you're like, oh, this is like the top surgeon on the planet right here. Like, oh, that makes sense. Or, oh, this dude actually just installed that Neuralink chip in that guy's head that was on Twitter. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like, it's almost like Yeah, if you sift and you curate a group of high level cool people, they just happen to be also doing amazing things.
Totally.
I can't think of the last time I met somebody who was like really a good person and really cool and has these characteristics that we're talking about, and they weren't doing some high level shit.
Totally.
I've never seen it.
As the saying goes, competence breeds confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, once you do enough of those things that builds you the repertoire, like you just carry that. Like there's no getting around it. It's like you with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? It's like once you develop the skill base to be able to handle yourself and to move your body and to control a situation, you now carry that probably everywhere you go. It's like if something was to happen, you probably have an air of confidence, not fake, where you can be like, yeah, I could do something here. I mean, Tim Kennedy talks about that all the time. That guy's a walking weapon.
Yeah.
Like if there's anything that was ever to break down, he's like, cool, bring it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and he's not joking.
100%. Yeah. I got into jiu-jitsu when I was 15 years old. And I want to say it was like the most impactful thing for me during that period of time in my life was like just rolling and getting dominated. And I was undersized. And so like I only could rely on technique. Like if you get in jiu-jitsu and you're 220 pounds and super strong, like, yeah, you can still develop skills, but the smaller dudes have to develop skills and have to have good technique. And for me, I got my ass kicked like 3 times in high school. And then eventually it was like, dude, I got to figure this out. Like I can't lift enough weights to fight all these guys. And, and yeah, once I learned jiu-jitsu, it's weird. Like I kind of stopped getting in fights. I ended up having a few more after that, but the frequency of street fights went down. Which I was like, hey, this is good. This is nice. Cause like some shit would pop off and you would just be like, look, man, like this is not good. Like how much is your deductible? Like it's just not going to be a great situation. And when like a moment gets to a boiling point where it seems like violence is going to occur between 2 males, if one of the guys is extremely calm, that's the dude who knows what's up. And people aren't used to that. And when they encounter somebody who like they're yelling and taking their shirt off and like beating their chest, and another guy's just over there and his resting heart rate is like 48 and hadn't changed, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do what we're about to do because he seems too calm for this situation.
Have you ever seen that video with that UFC fighters in like a restaurant with his like family and friends or something like that? And some guy comes in probably drunk or on drugs or something. He's like throwing chairs and he's thrashing around and he's like yelling and he's like swearing at people. And the UFC fighter, have you seen this?
No.
The UFC fighter gets up and walks over, calm as could be, right? And he's like, hey man, like we're just trying to enjoy a dinner. Like if you could just not do this and like take this outside. And the guy's like drunk and stupid, right? He's like, fuck you. And he's like losing his mind. He's like, what the fuck are you gonna do? And like being just very aggressive, right? And he's like, yeah, no, I'm sure you're probably going through something, but like it'd be great if you could just like not do this anymore. And the guy came at him, and like the UFC fighter within like one move had the guy like down on the ground with his knee on his neck, like holding his arm, and like with his other arm he's like waving over like a security. And he's like, hey, can you come over here and like hang? It's like that,
amazing.
right?
Yeah, it is like that.
But
amazing.
So to the men listening to the show, I'm curious if you had to pick one form of training to have that air of confidence or to have that ability to know you could handle a situation if something happened, would it be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or what would you say?
Yeah, for me it would be jiu-jitsu all day long.
Okay.
Because it is, like I just said, size does matter when these kind of situations come up, but I think jiu-jitsu is the one martial art where like it can somewhat level the playing field, and you know it because if you watch like really high level jiu-jitsu tournaments, you'll see like sometimes they have like an open class where anybody can compete at any weight range, and you'll have black belts in there that are like 155 pounds going against like 225, and a lot of times the 155 guys win. And you're never going to see that like in boxing or kickboxing. You're not going to see a guy 220 go against 150. Like it's just not even going to be close. Yeah, so I would say jiu-jitsu would be the preferred one, and I think if you're a young male and you're training with good training partners and a good leader and a good dojo, the chances of you getting hurt are very low. And you're not sitting there and just like beating your heads together like a boxer would. No offense to boxing, but like I was a relatively smart kid growing up. I was valedictorian until I was like a senior in high school and smoked too much weed. But I knew like I wanted to protect my brain, and jiu-jitsu is like, it's kind of a physical body chess match without beating each other's heads in. And as long as you can sort of leave your ego at the door and tap early, anytime you get put into, a certain submission, like you're probably not going to get hurt. Usually. You can. For me, I had to hang it up. Like I started when I was 15 and I rolled off and on for 10 to 12 years. And then as I got into my late 30s, I kept trying to balance these several sports I was doing. I was doing jiu-jitsu, skydiving, foil surfing, snowboarding, started playing pickleball. And I'm so competitive. I wanted to be great at all of them. And I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu consistent. And I just started to notice, like, every time I'd get in there, even if I'm rolling smart, little things started to hurt more. And so I've officially like kind of hung up my gi and said, I'm not rolling anymore. But I feel like at this point I've gotten everything that I want out of it. Yeah. And I feel comfortable and calm when I walk in a room. I feel safe. If something happens, I've got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Yeah. And so I try to encourage, like, I have a couple of groups of friends. I have a handful of guys that are my age. I got a group of guys that are like between 55 and 65 years old that are like CEOs, run companies and stuff. It's like this different crew I hang out with, and I'm the youngest one in that crew. And then I have a handful of buddies that are like in their 20s. And so I always try to like be an ambassador for jiu-jitsu and tell the guys in their 20s, I'm like, look, dude, you're still made of rubber. You could eat Skittles all day long and have a six-pack. Like, now's the time. You just need about 3 years of training and it will change your life.
You wouldn't recommend it to the older guys?
You can do it. You can do it. It just hurts a little bit more. Yeah. I mean, it is literally a game of like taking your joints and twisting them to a spot where they're nearly broken. Yeah. And so I actually don't think it's good for longevity. If you look at really good jiu-jitsu guys that have been doing it for 20 years that are older, man, a lot of them got back problems. Yeah. That's just all there is to it. And for me, I did my time, and I felt like I need to take my chips off the table. And for all the guys like Jocko and Tim Kennedy and those dudes that are still rolling in their 50s and 60s and the Rogans of the world, man, more power to you. Yeah. But for me, I'm focused on other things now. But I think as a young guy, it's like the thing to do.
It's definitely high on my list of things I would like to do for a season. I don't care to do it for 10 to 20 years, but I probably would put running into that same camp. I mean, I only got into running maybe a couple of years ago, and I recognize the toll it takes, especially when you start getting into endurance, like marathons and ultra marathons. And like, that's a knee issue. You mentioned back issue for rolling. I mean, running's knee issues, right? And so, yeah, but it is just to like learn the basic skill base of it. Like a season of that sounds super appealing to me. I did it for the first time maybe a month ago.
Where'd you go? 10th Planet?
Yeah. Yeah. My buddy Colin Carr, he's a coach out of there.
Nice.
And I know one of the other head coaches there rolls with Rogan or has with a few times. Yeah.
He's about our size.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gabe's good.
Yeah. But so that was the first time I ever went, and it was so weird, dude. Like I'm not an unfit guy, like generally speaking.
You're fit.
Thank you. And, but I was sweating a type of sweat I'd never sweat before. And I think it was like maybe nervous tension type situation because I fucking smelled horrible. Yeah. And I was like, I've sweat like sauna's cool. Like going a hard run in the sun, super cool. But I'm not like smelly. This was the first time after getting off sweating like that where I was like, what just happened? Was this like the extra sympathetic nervous system kicked in? And it, like, I don't know, like
probably that. And your microbiome and somebody else's microbiome and this other guy's microbiome, all y'all is coming together.
That's
like
probably
this,
true.
You know what I mean? So I think it's a concoction of a lot of things.
Yeah.
But that's great. No, I'm not saying you can't get into it when you're
sure.
you're our age, but I think it's diminishing returns if you go too long.
Totally.
But it is absolutely worth doing, because the first time you go in there and you think you're fit and you kind of know a thing or two, and you just get absolutely manhandled like a 14-year-old, you're like, oh, I don't know shit.
That's exactly how I felt.
I don't know anything. Like, it's actually unsafe for me to be walking around right now, because anybody could just literally like take my wife and just manhandle me.
Exactly. That is like the biggest thing for me.
Yeah.
It's actually less about me, and it's more about like, if somebody messed with my girlfriend, I would like to know that I could actually do something that didn't require me to like pull a gun or some stupid thing like that.
And the other cool thing about jiu-jitsu is, like, if let's hope those situations don't happen. We don't want them to happen, but if one of those situations comes up, you can literally like end a fight and not hurt somebody. You know what I mean? I've been in a few street fights where I had to choke a guy out and just, choked him out, put him nicely, laid him on the ground, and walked away, and he was fine. Like, I didn't like crush his head or anything like that. And it was somebody who attacked me. And so it's like, okay, attack, defense, choke him out, put him on the ground, safe. It's fine. He wakes up here in like 10, 15 seconds and he's fine.
Where were you?
This is in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah. It was not good. It was actually, it was funny because I was working at a bar in Australia. This is 2008 in a town called Coogee Beach. And there's a bar there that's like, it's like 3 floors, like 6 bars within the bar. And in Australia at that time, they did have credit card machines, but it was kind of known when you go to the bar, you pay cash. Like, I was one of the bartenders. Like, we didn't really take cards. It was all cash. And so at the end of the night, the bar closes out like 3:00 in the morning, 3:30. And all the bartenders from the 6 bars within this bar come down, and dude, no bullshit, it's like a scene out of the movie. Like, there's money counters going, because we'd pull like $50,000 in a night, because this is a big ass bar. And so you have like, 16 people that are all bartenders, like good looking girls and guys, and there's money going, and yeah, there's probably some people doing some cocaine and a few other things, and everybody's kind of partying. It's in the night, and there was one dude there who was this white guy who thought he was like some kind of rapper dude. And like, he thought he was ghetto or whatever, but like the ghetto in Australia compared to the ghetto in the United States, like it ain't even close. Like, it was not a very rough spot. And he started rapping on me. Like, he was like Eminem light, he wasn't good. And he was rapping on me, and I was just sitting there, and I had already done him up to that point. I'd already been rolling jiu-jitsu for like, I think 4 or 5 years. And I just told him, I said, hey man, those things you're saying aren't nice, and don't talk about my mom like that, and let's just not do the whole rap battle thing. I'm not a good rapper. And he just kept going and going and going. And I was like, all right, well, it seems based on your words that you want to have a physical encounter. So I guess that's what we're gonna have to do. And he was like, oh yeah. And so like, all of our coworkers are over here, and the bar's big enough where like we quietly separated and went off to this other side. And he does the typical thing that like a lot of guys do when they're about to get in a fight, like jumping up and down and yelling and using his voice and like taking his shirt off. And I'm just sitting there like, all right, man, well, I guess we're going to do this. And sure enough, he comes and starts swinging on me, and I just turn him around real fast, rear naked choke, and took him all the way to the point where he went to sleep. And I put him on the ground, and then I'm just standing above him. And he eventually comes to, and he looks up. And have you ever been knocked out before? When you get knocked out or choked out, there's like a lapse in your memory that occurs, and you kind of don't know what's going on for a little bit when you come back. And you're like, wait, where the fuck am I? And you start looking around. So like, he was looking up. He's going, wait, what the fuck's going on? And then he saw me, and he was like, oh yeah, I remember we were fighting. And like, he comes at me again, and I'm like, hey dude, you're like, this is over. Like, I already choked you out. I could have done more than that. I don't want to hurt you. I'm going to put you back down. He's coming at me again. I had to choke him out again. I choked him out and put him on the ground. And nicely, like, I didn't throw him or anything. I just set him down. He goes to sleep. The next time he wakes up, he just starts picking up glass and just starts throwing bottles and shit at me. And all the coworkers come over, and They get him and they kick him out of the bar, and they're like, dude, you got to go home. That guy, this is part of the reason why I don't get in street fights anymore. That guy went home. He came back to the bar, and we have cameras outside the bar. There's a main door that we locked, and then there's like a service entrance door over here. He was standing on this side of the service entrance door with 2 knives.
Oh my God.
Big knives, dude. And we could see him in the camera. My manager called me. He was like, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning at that time. He was like, dude, look at this. We looked at the camera, and that guy's standing on the other side of the door with 2 big knives, waiting on me to walk out the door. And like, we saw it, and my manager's like, dude, you can't leave right now. We're gonna have to peek our head out. And so the manager peeks his head out, and it's like, hey, dude, we see you. Like, we're gonna call the cops. You're gonna have to leave. And the guy realized what was going on, and he pieced out. But it turns out that guy, I didn't know this, but that guy was on acid that night.
Oh God.
And he was tripping his balls off.
Oh my gosh.
And aggressively trying to attack me. And I choked him out twice. And he went to a place that was like way far gone, where he got some knives. And thank God we had cameras, because otherwise, like, I would have just walked out that door just carelessly and be like, oh, hey, see y'all later. We'll catch you tomorrow. And that guy would have been like right there. And I don't think he was messing around. So
damn.
That's why, like, yeah, you just have to avoid street fights at all costs. And I think you see a lot of guys that are good fighters do everything they can to avoid those kind of violent confrontations, because you just never know when something could go sideways like that.
Guns are guns illegal in Australia?
I don't think they're illegal, but they disarmed the nation like in, was that 96 or 97? They had a bad school shooting, and everybody just relinquished their guns.
Okay.
And so you find that, like, I don't know how it is now. I haven't been back in like 15 years, but back in the day, like when I was there, there was a lot of fist fights happening.
Yeah.
Guys just resolved it that way because it never escalated past that point.
Right.
So.
Damn, that's a crazy story, man. Well, I'm glad you didn't get stabbed.
Didn't get stabbed.
I want to pull back on your story a little bit. So let's circle back to, you moved back to Lubbock from Clearwater, went to school. Sounds like you graduated school and then you went to college in UT?
Yep, in business school.
Okay. Is there any relevant stories to there that are from lessons learned, things we should tap on before we kind of get to the next step?
Yeah, I think so. I really wanted to get into business school at University of Texas. As an 18-year-old at the time, I felt like that was like the one deciding factor on whether I was going to be successful or not. And I don't know how the programming got that deep in my mind that was the most important thing, but I wanted to be in McCombs School of Business. I didn't get in my first year, and I was kind of upset about that. I went and talked to the dean. I said, hey, I feel like I should be in this school based on my grades, this and that. And she said, I'll tell you what, like if you get a 3.75 your first year of college, as a freshman here at UT, I'll just automatically let you in. I was like, all right. I was like, challenge accepted. And I worked my fucking ass off that year. And most people, when they first go to college, like that first year, they usually tank grades like this, and then they start to pull back up afterwards. Me, my first year, I got a 4.0. I was like, dude, I'm getting in that school because that's what's important, and I'll only be successful if I have a business degree. So I got into McCombs, and after being in there for 3 years, I realized at the end that like I was studying management information systems. It's an IT business degree. And I was doing that because I sat down with my counselor one day, and she showed me the average starting salaries of graduates. And she's like, okay, finance guys get paid this, management information guys are this, accounting guys are this. Which one do you want to choose? And I'm just like, well, I came from like a poor family, so let me just choose the one with the biggest number.
Totally.
And to me now that just sounds fucking insane.
Yeah. Like
nobody was there to really be like, how do you feel when you're doing computer programming? Do you really think like this idea of doing SQL Server and C++ is going to be your cup of tea? You kind of seem like a brute athlete. Like, I don't know what your bloodline is, but I don't think like this is for you. Nobody talked to me about that. Instead, it was just making a decision based on a dollar written on a piece of paper. And the difference weren't that much. It's like this one is like average starting 62,500. This one is like 61,740. It's like micro. And that's how I made my decision. And then I got to my 4th year and I was about to graduate. And I was like, I had this realization like, man, I don't want to do this fucking job. This is not what I want to do at all, actually. And I knew because I'd done an intern, I shadowed some people, and I talked to people who had graduated, who got into my field. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that. In fact, I want to go the opposite direction, and I want to go be a catastrophe adjuster, because that's what my brother did. And it was like a paid on performance job that you work in the middle of chaos, and you use your hands, you're inside, you're outside, you're going to places where like most people would never fucking go to. Like when there's 8 feet of water in Louisiana, or there's an F5 tornado that goes through Oklahoma City, like that's where we go to. I was like, you know what? I want to go do that job. And so after college, I went completely broke, and was living on couches and doing medical studies for money for the first year to 2 to get my foot in the door to become a catastrophe adjuster. And eventually I got in, and that's what I did for 12 or 13 years. And it was a fantastic job for me at that time in my life.
Before we get into that, I do want to dig into that a little bit, but I want to pull back on something you said that I don't want people to miss. You said, I don't know how the programming got so deep into my brain, essentially talking about how like you were convinced somehow to believe that the degree or the career was the thing that was going to set you up for financial success. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good way to phrase that, because it's really interesting how easily programmable we are when we're younger, because I honestly did the same thing, but I had a different metric for what I defined success. Yours was financial, mine was happiness. I chose my initial career path as an occupational therapist based on a Google search, looking for who has the happiest career, or who are the most like fulfilled or happy in their profession. That's how I chose occupational therapy as a career. Wasn't a good fit for me. I did it for 4 years, hated it. I don't ever plan on practicing anymore ever again. But it's interesting though, right? There was some sort of programming, and that was probably, to your point, growing up poor, mine was like, I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
So I was seeking something that was going to make me happy based on the career choice that I was going to have, which is a stupid way to try to figure out how to be happy. But I didn't know any better, right? Like that was my programming.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting when you said that like that. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of us do that.
Yeah. And what are the odds that you as an 18-year-old is going to make the right call of what you want to do over the next 50 or 60 years of your life?
Your brain is still developing until you're like 27. You have no idea.
Yeah. You have no idea. Like I'm pretty good at like, you know, as I'm going through this game, I feel like I kind of checkpoint every now and then. I'm like, I have a decent idea of how I thought when I was 18 years old. And then at 23 and 28 and 31 and 35 and 37. And like, I can't like transport myself back to that time, but I know the decisions I made when I was that age. And I'm like, a lot of those decisions sucked. Those were not good calls. Yeah. And so the idea that we take people that are 18 years old and tell them to like make the decision that's going to determine what they do for a large portion of the hours that they're on this planet, like, that's crazy. And then guys and gals graduate with these degrees and they go into these fields and they don't want to get out of them, either A, because they're hunkered down with too much debt, or B, they somehow have a part of their identity woven into this. And they're like, no, I got this degree in accounting. I have to do accounting. And I think there needs to be more conversations between people who are, I don't want to say made it, but people who are at a different level, talking to those young people and say like, it's okay to make mistakes and you can change your path as you go, and don't make your decision just based on dollars, because it might end up not being what you want to do.
Totally. Luckily, I mean, yes, I totally agree. I mean, so much of the system is built around creating cogs in a wheel, which is no longer valuable anymore. It used to be in the industrial age, but that age is long gone. I think actually last time I checked, it's only like 30% of actual products are even made in America anymore. Wow. So the fact that we're still trying to educate humans to get into a factory that aren't even in America anymore insanity at this point. But I recently met a kid. I do think there's like, I have hope, because I did meet a kid recently at this like creators networking event deal. And he just graduated out of college. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, what'd you graduate with? Just curious as to like what kids are going to school for. And he goes, entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And he goes, yeah. And he pulled out his phone and he had already started a business. It's essentially like a really clean electrolyte that's made with like honey and sodium or something like that. But I think it's called Honey, HYNY or something like that. But I was like, cool. Okay, that's interesting. So like schools are figuring it out, at least colleges are figuring out like the way things are going aren't working, and people, I mean, I'm sure they're seeing it. So I'm sure they're feeling the pain of less people going to college, realizing it's a total waste of time. So now they're trying to like counterbalance it by offering programs like entrepreneurship. But yeah, I'm slightly hopeful for the future of it, but yes, it's been horrendous, especially when we were in school. Like they did not set us up for even the remote bit of success in any way, shape, or form.
No, and it's so weird. I look at it now, I'm like, man, I went and did job shadowing for people who hated their jobs. Yeah, and I wasn't wanted to go do that job.
I know.
Like, what is going on here? This is insane. So. Yeah, I don't know what the future is for college. I mean, think about if you're jumping in it now, like obviously you're not getting a degree in like radiology. I don't know why you would get a degree in maybe computer programming, but like coding and like these pattern recognition things that AI is starting to gobble up is like, it's almost like a dice roll, you know, to get in there now and choose something because you don't know what the landscape's going to look like in 4 years. And for me running this company now, when I talk to guys that I'm hiring, it's like college is cool, but if instead I find somebody who like maybe graduated high school when they were 16 and left home and did this and this, and then maybe they made a few mistakes, that's okay. But they were like swinging on things and they had risk and like ups and downs and failures, and were actually like either in their own companies or working for other people, they were running experiments in the real world. Because a lot of college, like in the business school, is just like simulations. You know what I mean? It's literally like, hey, you have a problem. You have 14 bananas and you got to buy them for this price and sell them for this price. It's like, if my banana business in this case study doesn't do well, I don't actually, maybe I don't get a good grade, but it doesn't hurt that bad. Versus if you go start a banana business and it fails, like it hurts way more. The lessons are like way more impactful. So if I find people that are like outside the norm now, and didn't go into that kind of system, I'm more stoked on them. And I actually think my wife is a really good example of that. She totally opposite than going to college. She actually went to prison for drugs when she was 17 years old, because she grew up on welfare, and like I said, she's single family home. Her dad was in prison, and where she was at in South Texas, like these drug gangs were the only people who had money. And so she ended up becoming a mule for one of these drug gangs and moving a lot of weight around, and eventually one day she got popped and she got put in prison till she was 19 years old.
Damn.
And she doesn't share that story with a ton of people. She's been more open about talking about it now because there's a lot of judgment that comes with that.
Sure.
I'm not encouraging that behavior, but call it selling drugs, call it entrepreneurship, call it whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's a commodity, and she was a part of that game, unfortunately. And she got popped and she went to prison. And when she got out of prison, she realized that I'm now a convicted felon. I can't go get a regular job like everybody else. They're not going to hire me at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Chase Bank is not looking for people with my CV right now. So she got kind of forced into this spot where she realized, like, the only way I can be successful now is if I create. That's it. I have to make my own thing. And it's the opposite. The way she took that, what some people would consider a very negative experience. There's not a lot of people we know here in Austin been to prison. She took that experience and turned it into something amazing and built a real estate empire on her own with no outside funding, and just absolutely slayed it. She took that prison situation and created, because she had to. My dad, who I love and respect, he went to prison for almost the exact same thing, for drugs, for about the same amount of time. When he got out of prison, he was like, I'm a convicted felon. We can't go live in this area here. They won't approve my application. I can't get that job there because I'm a felon. They won't approve my application. So my whole time growing up, I heard about like why we could not do things because my dad was a convicted felon. Then I meet this woman when I'm, 32, 33 years old, who eventually opens up to me and says, hey, I don't want you to judge me for this, but like, I went to prison and this is why, and this is what happened. And this is what the fuck I did afterwards. When she said that shit to me, I was like, I'm gonna fucking marry this person. This is the best thing I think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Somebody taking the same situation that I watched as a kid, and instead of turning it into something that is slowing you down, it is like a fucking propellant. And I was just like, this is fucking rad.
I love that, man.
We're doing this.
That reminds me of a lot of the studies that they've done with twins that have, for whatever reason, got separated when they were younger or earlier. And they'll go through like completely different scenarios and then have like, or no, excuse me. What happens is like they just have like completely different ways of framing their upbringing. In terms of like, they went through the same scenario when they were younger, but how they framed it, whether it was like beneficial to their life or detrimental to their life, was purely just a matter of like their perspective on the situation, which sounds like exactly what happened with your wife and your father. It was like maybe similar scenarios, but how you frame it and the perspective you take on the scenario is the determinant as to whether this is good or bad in your life. So that's cool.
Yeah. It's yeah, I mean, she's just an inspiring person for me. So
let's get into the catastrophe adjusting. So if nobody has any idea what the hell that is or what you were even doing, tell us.
So if you ever turn on your TV and you see like a hurricane hit Louisiana and all these homes are flooded, or a tornado went through Oklahoma, the insurance companies of the world, the Allstate, State Farms, all those guys, they have a certain number of adjusters who are people who go out and look and determine what a building's worth when it blows down. They have a certain number of those. When big catastrophes hit, they have to hire these independent catastrophe adjusters, which is what I was. So we only come in whenever it's like a really big storm. And you have independent firms that work for these large insurance carriers. And when a big storm hits, like a tornado or a giant California wildfire, they call these firms and say, hey, we need 20 adjusters, and they got to be there in 48 hours. And then I'm a catastrophe adjuster. My phone rings. They say, hey, we need you in Slidell, Louisiana in 24 hours. Can you be there? And it doesn't matter like if you're going to a wedding, it's your birthday, anniversary, whatever it is, like you have to drop all your shit and go.
What if you don't? You just lose your job? How does that work?
So you're a 1099 contractor. So you're not a direct employee of these companies, and you're working your way up this roster. And so you accepting opportunities and providing value for these companies puts you higher up in the roster and gets you better opportunities and the opportunity to make more money. And so you want to be saying yes to a lot of these opportunities, especially in the beginning of your game. And so for me, it's like when I first got in it in like 2009, 2010, I was saying yes to everything. And it was like, for years, my life was like, I'd be in New York working like an ice storm, and then I'd go straight from there to Kansas City. A hailstorm just hit, and then I would go to LA for a windstorm, and then a fire would pop up here, and I would just, I would leave sometimes I would leave like in March sometimes, and I wouldn't come back home till like November.
Was it emotionally taxing work? Because I gotta imagine you're working with people that are like just lost probably everything. I'm sure they're in turmoil. Like,
it is. Yeah, it is. It is very emotionally taxing, and you have to basically create a really good like emotional wall. And unfortunately for me, I did it so long, and I went to so many really gnarly storms that like sometimes I wouldn't take that emotional wall off when I would be interacting with my family and shit. Yeah, because all day long, like it's an amazing job where you're a lucky person to be able to go and provide help for somebody and get paid to do it. That's amazing. The downside is, yes, you go into Moore, Oklahoma in 2013, and it really looks like a bomb went off. I mean, literally, it's just slabs in the whole neighborhood as far as you can fucking see. And they're pulling bodies out of those houses. And you're talking to somebody who just lost their neighbor and their dog's dead, and they're like losing their mind on you because they're just went through a very traumatic moment. And you have to be the calm person in the room that can evaluate what that building's worth and walk these people through the process, even if they are cussing you out or crying or losing their shit, or occasionally they're very happy and they're very thankful for you being there and helping them out. So you have to be able to operate in an environment where things that we all depend on, like clean water and internet and power and hospitals and cops and firemen and support and resources and Wi-Fi and GPS and all that shit, it's not always there. You know, when I landed in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria in 2018, dude, it was the wildest thing ever. That was a Category 5 hurricane that went across that island and didn't slow down. It was like a Cat 5 the whole time. It was 150 mile an hour winds and a huge surge. And when I flew into Puerto Rico after that storm, I was one of the first catastrophe adjusters on that island. Dude, we're in like a big plane. I mean, it probably sits 400 people. You know, you got like 3 rows in the center and then 2 on the side. And it's at night. We're flying into Puerto Rico. And it's me on that airplane and like 13 guys. Jesus. That's it. The plane sits like, probably 400 people. And it's just me and a bunch of linemen. These are like electricians that are going to rebuild the power structure, and me. And we're all kind of like looking around this plane. Like, it felt like a scary movie. Like, it was insane. And as you're flying into the island, it's totally dark and you just see fires popping up because that's the only way they could like cook and heat and everything else. It was old school, dude, where like nothing worked. And you land there. I had a condo set up that I was going to rent for a month. And it was like a fucking $1 a day. Like this, I mean, in a town that's been as cheap as it should have been. I think it was 500.
What? The town was just massacred.
Like, it was, but they were still like, "Hey, you're gonna have to pay us because we don't have any."
I would have negotiated that deal. Yeah. I'd have been like, "Listen, no one else is coming here."
Yeah, exactly. But you go into a situation like that, and there's no power, rarely power, Wi-Fi. Pretty rare, pretty spotty, no hospitals, fire department and police there. A lot of them just kind of abandon their posts because you got to take care of your family. And like those are some of the immediate challenges with that job. And then like probably number 7 on that list of top 10 is the language barrier. But that's not even the top. The top thing is like, don't get hurt, because if you step on a rusty nail in that situation and there's not a hospital to go to, you might lose your leg. And when I got there, I saw it and I saw how big of a challenge it was and how much these people really needed help. And at that time, I've been doing that job for like 10 or 11 years. I was really good at it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. And so, you know, I just worked 100 hours a week for 8 or 9 weeks straight. And you work as hard as you can possibly work, and you help as many people as you can possibly help. And you do get compensated pretty well for that because you're working in a chaotic environment and you're away from your family and there's risk involved.
Do you thrive in a chaotic environment? I
do exceptionally well. I feel strangely comfortable when things are fucked up and people are like losing their shit.
It's good for business.
It is good for business. And so this catastrophe insurance adjusting job that I did for 12 years was like, it was the perfect thing for me in my 20s and early 30s, because it was the only job I'd ever seen that was paid on performance, but you don't really own your own business and you're not doing sales, and it had a physical aspect where 12 hours of the day you're walking around on buildings and you're assessing damages, and then it had the mental aspect where you're writing estimates and you're doing technical policy work stuff. And I saw that and I was like, I can be really good at this job. And so that's what I did. And I did it for so long at such a kind of intense rate where I was running a lot of 80 to 100 hour work weeks that I was able to build a financial runway big enough where I could launch ideas off my own capital. And that's how I started this company.
Do you think you could ever go back and do it?
No. And I still get called to do it. But I've moved to a different phase in my life where being on the road for 300 days out of the year is just not fitting into my model. Like I want to start a family. I want to continue to build this company. And it's just not for me now. There was when I was in my 20s, it was the thing. And I think it is actually a really good fit for a lot of young guys that want to get out there and work with their hands, and they're down to work in chaos, and they want to make a good living and help a lot of people. Like, there's not a lot of jobs you can go out there and you make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in a year, like without owning your own business. There's just not a lot of them, and that's not to brag. That's just the data points. But to do that, you have to deploy like 9 months out of the year. But what you get out of it, other than, you can make a decent amount of money, is that you actually have an impact whenever a big catastrophe hits. Like when Houston got flooded after Harvey, I think I worked 200 or 300 of those claims. Like, you have a real impact. Like, you're writing checks of like 100, 200, 300,000 to people who need to rebuild their homes. And like, occasionally you're like actually handing that check over, like the fucking, like Bob Barker, like Price is Right. You're like, this is for you. And they're like so stoked. Like, it's where the rubber meets the road in these catastrophes. And you get to be that person that goes and helps these people out. That's an amazing feeling. And when you go work, you're looking at houses and properties at all income levels. So, if I'm working in New York, like I work Harlem, or, I'm working Harlem all the way to the Hamptons and everything in between. And through that, I learned that like this money thing that we're all pursuing, man, I've met some really happy people that don't have a whole lot. And I get to walk into their house and it's 1,200 square feet. There's 8 people living in there. And they just went through some kind of disaster, yet they're calm and cool. And they're very nice, and they're content with what they have. And there's something there. And then I go to some other spot where, a person's got a $15 million house and they're very upset and they're losing their shit on me. And I'm not even really related. I didn't cause it. I'm just a guy who's trying to help you out. And they're losing their shit on me. And I can see a little bit about how their personal relationships are and how their a guy treats his wife or a wife treats her husband. And they have the money and resources, and they're not as happy as I just went to this other house over here, and these people were kind of in the same situation with way less money, and they're happy, and these people are not. And so like, you get this weird, like, deep dive look into people at all income levels, and you start to recognize pattern that it's not always about the money.
Totally. Like you get a perspective on people in dire situations, and that reveals people's real character at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like when people are at their lowest is like, that's where the real character shines. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. I'm curious as to, so then why would somebody making $300K to $400K a year decide to go and make $0K a year to start Facet Athlete?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when I was doing the catastrophe adjusting thing, I was kind of at the top of the game there. I was working for the number one firm in that business, and I was the top revenue producer for like 8 years. And so I was walking away from a massive opportunity, but then the first thing that happened is I got burned out. And I'm the kind of guy who, like, a lot of how I've gotten to where I am today is through effort. And I have this voice in my head that says like, I don't get tired. I don't get tired. And it's like this stupid mantra thing. And it's just, I don't know where it came from, but it's in there. And I worked really, really hard in difficult environments for a long time. And I carried a lot of emotional weight and was disconnected from basically everybody back home. And I did that until the end of 2018 when I was working alongside my ex-fiance, and we'd been running 80 to 100 hour work weeks every week for Harvey hit and then Maria hit. So almost 3 months. And, me and that girl at the time had been together for 10 years, and she was working remote in Austin and I was in Puerto Rico. And, you know, at that time, like we were making like $150,000 a month doing this job. And I put the career and the money ahead of the relationship. And I don't think in the entire like 4 months prior to that, I even asked her like how her day was going. I just was like, hey, do you got that report? Hey, we got this new claim in. Did you just schedule that out? I just looked at that estimate. Can you correct this, this, and this? I need you to fill in the schedule here and call these people. That was a conversation I had with my ex-fiance for years. And then eventually, as we're working that storm, I'm sitting on the west side of the island. She called me up one day and she said, hello. And I said, hello. And nobody said anything for about 5 minutes. And at that point, both of us knew it was over.
Damn.
And so we blew up the relationship because, I mean, it's mostly on me because I put the career ahead of that. Because I thought money was going to make me happy. And so I kept pursuing these money goals. And as the years were progressing, it was like, my first goal was like 100,000. I'm like, man, if I make $100,000, dude, I'm going to be stoked. And I made it, and I wasn't stoked. And I was like, well, I fucked up the number. It was not high enough. That's the problem.
More is always better.
It's always got to be more. So I was like, it's got to be 200 and 300. And I kept hitting these goals. And I never ever talk about money in like a way of like trying to brag or sound cool. It's just data points for people. And then there was years where I was crossing this 500K mark. And the crazy thing about that job is like, the more money you make, it's negatively correlated with how much time you are at home and how connected you are to your people. So if you're super disconnected from your people, especially your partner, your wives and stuff, you're doing really well financially. Financially, you're crushing your relationships in the tank. And so me and my fiance, we split at that time, and we were together for a long period of time before that. And we own assets together. So we kind of had to do the divorce thing. And at that point we separated assets, sold the house, sold everything. I eventually got off the road like a month later, and I felt like so burned out and so disconnected and so like, probably like confused that I thought money was going to solve my problems, and I got more money than I had ever had. And I felt like shit. I felt so bad. And, and I blew up relationships with people around me that were very close because I was pursuing this goal. And at that point, I finally kind of realized like, I'm going to say from here on out, like my metric for success now is going to be the quality of the relationships around me, especially the close ones, and the impact I have on people. And as I was going through my catastrophe adjusting business, there was so many days that I was getting like 4 hours of sleep a night for a long period of time. And I was struggling with energy, and I was pressing that caffeine button over and over and over and over and drinking like, let me just walk you through a day. I would wake up like at 6 a.m. I would work from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. on my computer. And then I would go to my first claim in the field, usually by 7:30 or 8. I would be in the field working till 8 p.m. usually, if it's getting dark around 7 or 8. I eat my lunch on the road in between appointments. When I get home at 8 o'clock, I usually eat in front of the computer and work from 8 to 10. and then take a nap at 10 o'clock for 17 minutes, wake up at 10:17, drink a Red Bull, yeah, and then work till about 1 a.m. It was just totally ridiculous. And because I was running my machine like that, dude, my adrenals, all my shit was fucked up. And so my energy levels were all over the place. And
were you still telling yourself, I don't get tired?
I'm still telling myself I don't get tired, but like physically, dude, I felt awful. Like hair's falling out, like your resting heart rate is like high and you think you're an athlete, but your resting heart rate is at like 90, and like weird biological cues are coming in that you can tell your machine is fucked up. The race car had been running like 200 miles an hour for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I started at that point, like after I blew up that relationship, I was like, man, I got to figure out a way to work from home. And I started tinkering with different supplements that could solve my energy issues that I was having. And at the same time, I started doing adjusting work at home. I set up my own consulting company here. And for a couple of years after I got off the road, I worked claims around Austin as I was developing this fasted athlete idea. And then eventually, once I figured out the product, the first one we put out, which is called Lift, and it was there to give me energy all day long. Once I had that product, I was like, okay, I'm turning off my adjusting machine. And so I turned it off, and then my phone kept ringing. These firms literally kept calling with these opportunities that like I knew I could go out there and work for a month and make $75,000. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, I'm grateful for that job, and it was the best thing I could have done at the time. But now I want to get into something that is A, going to improve my health, and then B, is going to improve the health of other people. And I also want to educate people on the benefits of doing moderate fasting. And I feel like that lines up with this. And I feel like I'm the guy who can talk to people about like work performance and physical performance. And I'm a swing on this.
Yeah.
And I knew launching my own company, I wasn't going to make a lot of money in the beginning. I want to say I underestimated how much time, energy, capital was going to go into getting this thing off the ground. But even looking back at it now, you know, I'm 2 years in, year and a half, 2 years in roughly. And we're now getting to the point where we are profitable. But up until this point, it's like, you know, you're not paying yourself. You're literally working for free. And what gets me excited now is I used to get big paychecks for my last job, and that was like the feedback. And for me now, it's like a customer would just like send me a message, and they're like, well, I started taking Lyft a month ago, and I was struggling with my weight, and now like, you know, I had like a fourth grade teacher hit me up with a message like this. She's like, I was struggling with my weight. I couldn't handle the kids in my classroom. I started taking Lyft a month ago, and now I have energy all day long. And when I get off of work, I actually started going back to the gym. And like, then when I get done with the gym, I have some energy to cook at home instead of going to Whataburger. And it started this positive cycle, and people will hit me up and they're like, I lost 30 pounds. This is not like a weight loss thing. This is just something that give you some energy that started like a positive catalyst. And now they're off to the races and they're doing their own shit. And it's all because of their own choices that they're making. And like, when I get a message like that, I'm like, fuck yeah. I'll continue my volunteer work because that's my feedback now. That's what gets me fucking pumped up.
Yeah, man, the flywheel of the testimonials is like the most fulfilling thing ever. I mean, it's a big reason why I do this podcast show and a lot of the things that I do. And I remember I first stumbled upon that idea when I met a guy back when I lived in Minnesota. Some people have heard this story, but I met a guy who was probably in his like 50s of some form. And he had just recently quit his very long career. He was making a lot of money. And he started a business where he would, in Minnesota, it gets cold and you get potholes. The ground freezes and it breaks the streets. And he started a business where it was essentially like a Zamboni for potholes. He bought this big machine where you could drive around. It used like heat from some form to basically like melt the cement and like reseal the pothole so that it would last a lot longer than just throwing cement in there.
Wow.
Super cool. And I was talking to him about this business, and this was his first ever entrepreneurship endeavor. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, what's it like? Like, are you glad you did it? And he looked at me and he goes, this is the hardest I've ever worked, but the most fulfilled I've ever felt by my work. Mm-hmm. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, I want to know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea. It was always just the money or getting a paycheck or whatever the case might be. But when you're doing something like Facet Athlete, it just changes the way you look at business, at interactions, at working with people. Because like now it's your thing. You have a reputation, you have a belief behind it, you have a connection with the customer. Like whenever something good or bad happens, it's like the swing, because like it's you, it's your thing, right? It's your child.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's for sure a lot more emotional of a roller coaster, but it's so much more fulfilling, for sure.
Yeah, I think, like, I talk to guys every now and then, they're about to swing on an idea, and I'm always a person who's like, the two characteristics that I see that help me the most is you got to be passionate about what you're doing. Like, dude, if I was selling like new outdoor furniture, I'm just not that stoked about outdoor furniture. And I don't know if I would have enough endurance to go through the ups and downs to survive in the outdoor furniture world. But things like fasting and gut health and getting people's machine to the point where like they feel fucking amazing is something I'm passionate about. And so like that gives me that just increases my endurance, because we've all seen stories of like somebody started an idea and maybe it went up overnight and did really well. But to be honest, the majority of businesses don't go like that. The majority of them, it's like the IRS expects you to lose money the first 3 years at least. If you're not losing money, they're kind of looking at you like, what are you doing over here? Like we may have to audit you, dude, because you're an outlier. Yeah. So like to get through those first 2 or 3 years, you got to be passionate about something, and then you got to have some grit, man. That I think grit and the ability to survive and not get like just be hard to kill, I think is the difference, because the number of guys I've seen that had good ideas that swung on it for 6 months and got their ass kicked and then quit. Dude, that's like the majority of them that I've seen. And honestly, those ideas probably could have been great had they done it for 2 years or 3 years. And eventually you're going to, if it is good, you have a good product, you're passionate about it, you're connecting to a community, you're eventually going to break through.
Yeah.
But you got to have that grit. And then sometimes you got to sacrifice some lifestyle shit. You know what I mean?
Definitely know what you mean, man.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been, I don't know, 3-4 years into this now, and I continue to live as if like I'm bottom of the barrel. Like, because like everything just gets reinvested back into it, knowing that, because there's going to be bad years, there's going to be good years, there's going to be whatever, things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, like playing the long game, like being able to not be killed, to not quit. Like you mentioned a mantra earlier, how I never get tired. A mantra that has served me very well, and it's one that echoes in my brain all the time, and especially when I'm in like the depths of challenges, is I can't lose if I don't quit. That thing echoes in my brain all the time when I'm just like wanting to stop or thinking this isn't working or this is a terrible idea or like I should be doing something else. Is like, that's the thing. Even on a run, it's like I can't lose if I don't quit.
Yeah.
Very.
And the fact that it is hard should be an indicator that you're on the right path. You know what I mean? If it was easy, it's like
everyone would do it.
Everybody would do it. Yeah.
For sure.
Everybody would do it. And it's like, man, I really like the freedom and autonomy that comes with being an entrepreneur. Like just not having to ask somebody to go do something. You know, if I want to go to the coast this weekend and go wing foil or surf, like I'm going to do it, and I'm going to work all day long up to that point, and then I'm going to go ride, and then I'm going to come back and do my own thing, and I don't have to ask anybody about that.
Totally.
That is worth so much to me. Yeah, so I think
so just to wrap things up here, give the audience maybe a little short snippet of Facet Athlete and where you guys are going, what you guys are up to.
So Facet Athlete is a performance supplement company. We have our first product we launched. It's called Lift. It's the first creatine-based nootropic. I think creatine is the most proven supplement kind of all time, yet it's still clumped into this gym guy culture world. We're pulling it out of there and putting it in with good functional nootropics like lion's mane mushroom and a slow release caffeine. So we created Lift to kind of give people energy. The other thing we do is we educate people on the benefits of moderate fasting. I speak mostly to guys on this issue. I don't really speak to girls on it. My wife talks more to the female audience about women fasting, but for guys, I think occasionally skipping breakfast is not the craziest thing you've ever heard, and refrigerators haven't been around that long. So I'm a big believer in turning on your metabolic fat burning machine. I think guys like me and you are not uniquely equipped with a body that can burn fat for fuel. I think everybody has it, but it won't do it if you just try to trick it with like ketones or some weird diet. Like you have to remove fuel and allow your body to go, oh, don't we have some energy back there? Yeah, let's go grab that energy that's stored on the back of the sky. And so I like to educate guys on the benefits of moderate fasting, whether that's intermittent fasting, occasionally doing 24 hours. I don't think you normally have to do anything longer than that. And then we are just now launching a new product, a colostrum product, which is amazing for gut health. And from launching this 2 weeks ago to now and just talking with customers who are using it, like I realized that gut health might be the number one health issue affecting people today. And I think so much of the issues that people have stem from gut health. So whether it's autoimmune issues or energy issues or weight issues or mood issues or whatever it is, like, on days that your stomach is fucked up, you don't feel well. And so with colostrum, we're able to like heal the gut lining, provide probiotics, prebiotics, growth factors. A ton of great stuff is in colostrum that can get people's gut health correct. And once they have that foundation set right, it's like, then you add in the exercise and start weaving in a better diet, better lifestyle choices, and then your machine just goes up from here. So
yeah, I've got a lot of buddies that have gotten a lot more into colostrum lately, and yeah, the amount of health benefits that's come from it's been pretty astronomical.
I don't even consider it a supplement, really, because colostrum is the milk that comes out of mammals on the first 3 days of birth. So whether it's a human or a cow, they're all producing this sort of like thicker, yellower milk, and inside of there is like what nature decided is the best nutrients for babies. It's like, what are we going to grow babies out of? We'll make it out of this.
Yeah.
And so we're able to take excess colostrum from cows after their calves are nourished and freeze dry it and turn it into powder. We don't add anything else to it. And these are all grass fed, no antibiotics, like super high quality cows. We package it, sell it to people, and it's like, it's changed my life. Like once my gut health got right, I saw everything got better. Like people stop me and they're like, dude, are you like on something? You seem like you have more muscle than you used to have.
You're like calf milk, baby.
Yeah, I'm like baby calf juice. But I'm the same 150 pounds I've always been, but I'm just carrying more lean muscle because I'm not eating more protein. Like a lot of guys right now are like, dude, I'm a 200 grams of protein a day or something. And they're focused on that number. And I'm like, dude, I think you're looking at the wrong number. You're looking at the volume and the number of grams, and you need to be thinking about absorption. And if your absorption's not right, it doesn't matter what's on your plate. So at Fasted Athlete, we try to tell people like, do a little bit of moderate fasting, which will help balance your gut out. Add in this colostrum, which will further improve your digestion. And then at that point, like your absorption goes up and maybe you're eating 2 meals a day, whatever it is, but you fully like absorb all the nutrients on your plate. And once that happens, dude, it's like hair, skin, nails, your eyes, your muscle. Like it sounds crazy, but everything goes up.
Well said. You're 150? I'm about 150 as
150.
well. Interesting.
Yeah.
You're shredded, man. You're shredded 150. No joke.
Thank you for that. I only work out 3 days a week for
Nice.
30 to 45 minutes. I'm 37 years old and I feel stronger, more flexible, leaner, faster now than I ever have. And I work out less. And dude, this is not a shameless plug. It's because I do fasting. My body knows how to run on fat for fuel. And my colostrum has gotten my gut health to a point where I just absorb everything that's on my plate. Like straight, I eat 2 meals a day, and like, I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it. Like I'm all natural. I've never taken any kind of like steroids or testosterone or anything, which we don't want to go off on a tangent, but I feel very strongly that there's a lot of guys on social media right now that are super jacked and they're on the sauce. And I feel like if you are on the sauce and you're giving health advice to people, you should have a disclaimer at the bottom of every single one of your videos.
For sure.
Say, this is my testosterone regimen. I take this much here, here, and here.
Yeah.
And that way guys look at it and go, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
But for me, that's not anything I've ever had to do.
I used to be a personal trainer, and the young bucks would always come to me, and they always seem to have this belief in their mind that they're like, yeah, if I just worked out enough, I could look like so-and-so. And me, a little bit older than them, knew that wasn't fucking possible. Yeah. And it was always such an interesting conversation, because it was like, they just didn't grasp the fact of like, you can only really put on so much muscle, bro. Yeah. Like, like, and you could do that probably in a couple of years, but anything past that, you're going to need some sauce, bro. And like most people just don't get that. They're like, oh no, like if I just ate super healthy and a ton of protein and I worked out and I lifted all the time, I was like, no, like you would look good, but you wouldn't look like that. Like,
and I think most people have like a set point, you know what I mean? Where your body's trying to be at this spot, and if you're overweight, you probably need to reset that set point. But for me, like, dude, I've been 150, 155 for like, I don't know, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's just where I'm at. But my body composition is way different than it used to be. Totally. And so like, that's another number that I think people are focused too much on is the number on the scale. And it really should be about your body composition.
Totally. I have one last question. Before I ask that question though, I want to acknowledge you, man. From a difficult childhood and taking the best lessons out of it and bringing optimism with you as you came out of that, because not everybody does. Sometimes that crushes people, like we alluded to earlier in this conversation. For doing the grind of climbing the first mountain, of making a lot of money, and eventually realizing you were on the wrong mountain.
Yeah. And
now hopefully climbing the right mountain of just really, truly helping people and making a difference. And ultimately for just being a good guy and showing up today. So thank you. I want to acknowledge that.
Hey, I appreciate that. I've been really impressed with you and the community that you're building. And it's something that I look at and go, that's pretty amazing. And I know these things don't happen overnight. And when I see people working on things that have like, you probably worked on your community for years and years and years and got like micro gains and micro improvements, and you just kind of still did it. And then I go to one of your events the other day and there's like 50, 75 people there and everybody's fucking stoked and everybody's cool and smart. Like, I know that kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. So I acknowledge you. I respect the work that you do. I could see it. I knew right when I went to your event, I'm like, this guy's got it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. You're not wrong. It's taken a long time. Last question. It's really whatever your best, or before I ask it, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
You can go to facetathlete.com and you'll find our stuff on there, or on Instagram, facetathlete.co. If you're looking for our products, you can either buy it off our website or Amazon. You search Fasted Athlete Colostrum, you'll find us.
Cool. And you sent me some. Your branding is amazing, for the record. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Last question. Whatever your best piece of advice is. So if you were to go back to ground zero of starting Fasted Athlete and you were to talk to your younger self or anybody else in that circumstances of just like getting their entrepreneurship journey started, what would you tell your younger self or somebody else in that situation?
I would say find your authentic voice and use it and become a better communicator. And by doing that, you're going to start connecting with people more. Because in the beginning of my business, I wasn't speaking a lot. I wasn't going on a lot of podcasts. Instead, I was trying to pay people, influencers, micro-influencers, creators, to push my message out. And on the back of my shirt, it says, build yourself, lift your team. And that's what I believe. And that's part of the brand. And nobody can communicate that the way I can communicate it, because I feel it and I know it. And when I talk to people about like, hey, you should root your health goals in the idea that like you're going to become stronger and then you're going to show up better at your job or in your company, and you're going to create more there, which is going to get you resources to help pull your mom out of poverty, whatever it is. You becoming stronger can help those people. Me and that concept, I tried to explain to like TikTok creators and shit and micro influencers on Instagram that just take pictures of them in front of squat racks. They don't understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for the first year and a half, 2 years of this company, I was paying people to put out a message that they didn't quite get because it's not their company. They didn't build it, and that's no fault of theirs. Like, and in the past 6 months, I've really leaned into developing my communication skills, connecting with the right people, getting my voice out there, and really being more the face of the brand, and not from a point of like ego, like I want to be like known or something like that. No, just like because the brand is a part of me, and nobody can communicate my message and what we're about more than I can. So if you're just starting out, tell your story, put it out there, tell people what you're about, what the brand's about, because paying people to communicate the ideas that you know is not only expensive, but it probably won't produce the results that you think it's going to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most important job of a founder is to share the vision, because every time somebody else shares that vision, it's a little bit watered down version compared to what the founder actually shares. And that is, in my opinion, the number one job of the CEO or founder of a business is to spread the vision and share the vision. So
yeah,
totally agree. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Love it. Thanks, dog.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show. And if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.